And like my blue ribbon, that helps us to remember. And at the beginning of every presentation that I make, I choose one or two people from. So today, I want to remember two people. One of them is Marie Philip. Most of you who know who she was a very wise woman, and she carried Deafhood with her everywhere she went. She didn't receive enough recognition during her lifetime, so we're burning a candle today in her memory. I would also like to acknowledge Marvin Marshall, who is a very humble deaf man who recently passed away at the age of 80, who was a good friend of mine. Actually, to tell you the truth, he gave me this suit. And he was very dedicated and humble, and he focused his work on the deaf community. Deaf Studies was established, and we started understanding the concept of deaf culture not long ago, but we need to take a step back and really look at the big picture of the history and the philosophy and the social environments that took a role in deaf culture. Most writing about the deaf community focuses on the oppression. We see that term over and over again. And what? If we want to understand the meaning of that, we look at the whole environment of deafness in a larger way. We can borrow principles from philosophy. There's a whole new area that's opened up called post-colonization studies or post-colonial studies, where people throw off the oppression and throw off their colonizers and then need to take a look at who they really are. And I believe groups who have gone through this process. That will help us to understand ourselves. Harlan Lane, back in 1993, wrote some interesting article of the oppressed groups. In England, that occurred in deaf schools and deaf clubs. I'm not talking about the majority of hearing people. When we look back on schools for the deaf, before oralism became popular, I don't really believe that the colonization process was in full force, but I believe that it became a force to be reckoned with when oralism took the stage. Colonization is really a systematic development. Before oralism, there wasn't a systematic takeover of deaf activities and cultures and language. So some areas were not colonized. It's important to add here that most of the time we're focused on areas where deaf teachers have been removed from their teaching posts, or deaf children were taken away from exposure from older generations of deaf people. And that was one way that our culture was destroyed and taken over, because children were not exposed to history, and that's not yet complete. So in the colonization process, like imagine in England, say England as a country is going to take over another country, but a special group of people is given that responsibility to colonize. And it's not that the whole hearing population colonized us. It was only those with special powers who took roles in following this process. To decolonize a society, what does our world look like again when the colonizers have been removed from the we need to think about how we should run our world without the colonizing force. And we need to sit back and dream about how we might do this. Okay, this might be clear, I believe. If a community has equal membership, perhaps deaf people will replace hearing people in the hierarchical structures that organize deaf life. Important. The deaf people can't be blamed for how they've been influenced. They have incorporated some of the majority's beliefs into their own lives. And some of the negative cultural stereotypes that have been developed about the deaf have been incorporated and expunged those from their thinking. Now this is very important, this next slide. How can we structure deaf education? What would be the perfect structure, where we're not only solving the little problems, but we're addressing the big issues? How do we provide moral and spiritual aid within the education of deaf children? Providing them language isn't sufficient. They're fully human. Hearing parents cannot completely inculcate their deaf children with all they need to know to be a responsibility of the deaf community. Okay, I'm asking more big picture questions here. Where do we fit in this world? Who were we before we were colonized? What did our ancestors know that we may need to recapture and relearn from the past, and where is that documentation? And these questions are big, and they require big concepts. And okay, now we've heard forever deafness this, deafness that. It's still a focus on a loss of hearing. That's all it is. And that term doesn't really fit us as a people. So when I thought of the term deafhood, I thought of something that will allow deaf people to see themselves as equal with the majority. And now the term deafhood emerged for me because as I started to think about this, old questions became new again. What did being deaf mean? What did it mean for education? What does it mean for how deaf people see the world? We are visual people. We're people of the eye. But deafhood has become we can't allow it to become like a police state to limitedly define deafhood and cause all those of us who are deaf to be imprisoned by that definition. But we need to ask what we're here for. What's our purpose on the earth? And that answer might be a bit different for each. If a child who is deaf is born to deaf parents, they don't automatically know everything that they need to know. They need to be taught by their parents. So, if a child is removed okay, I use the sign to indicate minority. Minority cultures are different from majority cultures in that children of the majority learn everything that they need to know by going through their daily lives, and they only need to learn that one culture. Minority culture children need to learn two cultures, and they need to become skilled at negotiating both. They also are put in the inferiority by being a member of the other culture. People from minority cultures, need to fight to maintain their lives every day. They need to fight off the oppression of the colonizing forces in order to live and develop in their lives comfortably. That requires a great amount of time. In addition to, it's also important not only to look out at the struggles with the majority, but also to look inward into the minority community.